Hello, my name is Morgan Gray, and welcome back to the Afrocentric Podcast.
In the sky, I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere. Friends to know and ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything.
We don't funk with racism. We don't funk with people who don't support the LGBTQ plus community. And baby, we damn sure don't funk with anybody who don't love a beautiful black queen, baby. You see this tape?
You don't let nobody act black and then go home and be white.
It only takes a little bit of white brainwash to activate the coon chip in the average Negro.
And a lot of white folk have demonstrated eloquently that they don't have no sense.
There's an old saying that goes, those who burn books will burn the people. The book burnings, the book bannings, and the objectification and erasion of critical race theories and the teachings of POC, BIPOC, and LGBTQIA plus history is more nefarious and sinister than you might think. And in this episode, it is my goal to argue that the rise of anti-intellectualism in America is a smokescreen for the war on education. Let me be more specific. There is no reason to restrict, ban, or censor the creative work of artists. Films, exhibitions, books, or any other creative work are often challenged with the best intentions of protecting the vulnerable from difficult ideas and information. Taking away any form of art, regardless of the medium, can harm people more than it can help people or protect them. The topics that are censored are usually censored themes that are more realistic, that are timeless and important to learn, so that the public and the population is not doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Furthermore, if students or just the general population are not expected to keep these topics in everyday schools, they might not be able to gain the awareness of these topics.
Because reading is what? Fundamental!
Y'all, motherfuckers getting dumber by the day now. And my question is are you going to be so simple or stupid? You got to pick a struggle. You can't be both. You got to pick one. Moreover, today I wanted to talk about anti-intellectualism in America because it is a problem. On a more personal note, I would say that I'm very dedicated to this topic because to me, intelligence is the most profitable thing that a person can have. And having the tools to be able to interact and interweave in between what is considered intellectualism in the white world, what is considered intellectualism in African American culture, African culture, or any other place in the world, it starts with reading. So this episode is dedicated to the Black intellects, those who are the supporters and the uplifters of Black excellence. It's also dedicated to the ancestors who paved the way for us to be here now. And this episode is also dedicated to those who might be anti-intellectual. And I hope by the end of this episode, you might change your mind and see why it's so important for us to become more enlightened and to start using critical thinking skills every day and not solely lead based off of emotions. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about is what does it mean if someone is an anti-intellectual? An anti-intellectual is a person opposed to or hostile towards intellectuals and modern academic, artistic, social, religious, and other theories associated with them. A person who believes that intellect and reason are less important than actions and emotions in solving practical problems and understanding reality. So, what is an anti-intellectual attitude? An anti-intellectual attitude refers to a person, or in this case, a student within an academic classroom, and their lack of interest in or disrespect for intellectual pursuits and critical thinking, and a performance for educational experience that is practical and requires only memorization. So, I'm going to stop here because there are a couple things that I did want to expand upon. I think that as the dawn of modernity, and the new age of technology has really hindered us. And when I say us, I mean Americans as a whole, especially after COVID. So one thing that I will say is that I feel like we are very desensitized when it comes to education, as well as we have a very screwed sense of time when it comes to history. A great example can be seen with slavery, because people will always tell you, as a Black person, why are y'all still so upset about slavery when it happened so long ago? And it wasn't that long ago. But as you can see, the idea of time and the way that they see time is very misconstrued, and it's done on purpose. Like during the civil rights movement, you'll notice that majority of the pictures that are seen in the front screen of the maybe like the March on Washington, they're printed in black and white, even though colored film was available during the time. So what you'll see is that people do stuff in media to distort the way that we look at time, and it also influences anti-intellectual. So that's where you see those attitudes like, it was so long ago, why are you guys so upset? Very desensitized and dehumanized. We wouldn't dare say that about the Jewish community. It happened so long ago. Why do you care about it? That would be considered anti-Semitic, but we don't have that same energy about slavery. So those are the attitudes that I see, and they're also revolving around the fact that, or the idea that a lot of American history cannot be taught without teaching racial history, because Black history is intertwined with American history. It almost is American history, but there's a large problem with people wanting to take race out of it, and they just want to start their own narrative, which again is the reason why I'm stressing the fact that we need to read as a whole. So I wanted to jump into a few statistics because it's imperative that the state does not censor the creative work of different artists through film, okay? So what I want to stress is the fact that the censorship of creativity creates room for intellectuals, and it also creates room for ignorance and corruptibility. I'm going to say that again. The censorship of creativity creates room for anti-intellectualism while creating room for ignorance and corruptibility. Why do you say that, Morgan? Well, as of 2022, 21% of American adults, which is roughly 43 million people in America, are functionally illiterate. There are so many people that walk past us every day that can't read. How many times have you sat in a classroom and the teacher did popcorn and you were terrified to read? Or if the shoe was on the other foot, how many times were you sitting in a classroom and you heard somebody read and you asked yourself, what's wrong? Why can't that baby sound it out? Or even through text messages and seeing how people will look at text messages and completely read what it is that they want to, because they don't have the ability to like analyze or read in between the lines or inject different ideas and thoughts into it. So there are a lot more people who are not able to read. Moreover, there are more people that are not able to really, like, other than summarize things, they're not able to critically think. And this is a problem because there are many fascists who are aware that fascist ideology, or the lack thereof, cannot survive in an environment that supports and participates in critical thinking. So what they're banking on is the fact that you niggas can't read, nor can y'all not critically think or comprehend or take the time to break down passages and allude them and connect them to different things. What they're banking on is that you all consider and to continue to listen to what everybody else says and jump on the bandwagon. That's what they're banking on instead of you actually getting off your ass and opening up a book. So as a result of this happening for years now, budgets for education projects such as public libraries, fine arts programs, as well as adult learning systems and centers are being cut all across the United States. Now, I will remember during the death and the shooting and the murder of George Floyd, I was watching a lot going on with the Mississippi Senate and the allocation to money and budgets to different parts of the of Mississippi. And I specifically remember Tate Reeves slashing the budget for public libraries around Mississippi. And that is, number one, very sad. Another thing I wanted to point out is the fact that in Tennessee and in Texas, their governors are also removing books from off of the shelves. Not just books that teach us about our history, Black history. In Texas, they took the Bible off of the shelf. Let this shit sink in and ask yourself why. Many historians around America fear that if Americans succeed in the censorship and the removal of critical race theory from schools, that the generations that come after will be ignorant of the mistakes that their ancestors made before them, and they may even be doomed to repeat those mistakes. Moreover, if the masses are not able to receive more information and more awareness for these topics through the creative work of artists, they may be doomed to repeat the mistakes of their forebears. Therefore, it's important to implement and integrate the arts into the culture. And I just wanted to really stand on my soapbox and say that there are amazing benefits to the arts. I feel like people think if it doesn't make money, it don't make sense, but art can help people process through pain that includes grief, anger, confusion, and it also gives them an outlet to be able to understand the world around them. Y'all be shitting on SoundCloud rappers, but at least they have an outlet to pour their pain into. Let's just be real about it for a moment. So
I couldn't stitch this, but I was just so thirsty that I had to make a comment and then video reply to my own comment. I'm going to go even a step further. I'm going to swing even bigger. Most people cannot read, period. We know for a fact that 50% of Americans are illiterate. And then I'm gonna push the envelope even more. I'm gonna say that of the 50% of us that are considered literate, I would say there's actually a 25% of people who can literally read the words and have zero comprehension skills. They can read words. They cannot read a narrative. They cannot comprehend a narrative. And that is a traumatizing experience. In America, our whole lives, I'll probably say up until right now, like if you're growing up right now and you can't read, you could probably really get away with a lot. But if you are 30, around like 25 to 30 and up, growing up, there is just simply no way you could get around not being able to read. There are so many things that in your day-to-day life require reading. And if you cannot do that, that has to be a flustering and frustrating experience. And then high school itself, like the education itself, is a triggering experience because these teachers know, these school systems know that you cannot read, right? They know that they've pushed this kindergartner, first, second, third grader through who has never been on the reading level, right? And then they push you all the way to high school. And then you get to high school and now we're popcorn reading, where people are literally laughing at you because you cannot read, but you can hear all the other kids who can read. Being a kid who can read in a room full of kids who can't, that is probably, we can point them out. Like that's how few kids can read. And so now you have this like idea that people who can read it's jealousy. It is that jealousy and embarrassment and shame has turned into anti-intellectualism in general. Because no, listening to a podcast no, that is not a substitute for reading. Can you not read? The answer is no, you can't read if you think that's a substitute. They're not the same thing. You're listening to someone's opinion versus a book being read to you. You have no ability to draw your own conclusions. You're not drawing any sense of imagination. You're not using you're not doing anything but listening. That's not reading. And if you've grown up not being able to read, being upset and traumatized by all these experiences, of course, when you get older and you have the option to not read, you're going to choose not to, because this has been a negative experience your whole life. And then when you see people who are, like you said in your video, who are rich and influential, who are also anti-intellectualism, it validates people who have these ideals because of their past, right? I just think that the education system in America has severely failed people. It is irreparable at this point. The amount of us who can read is such a minority that this is like a real conversation.
Now, the white man will tell you any intellectual being will have a great understanding of the literature workings that happen in Europe, specifically in Greece and in Rome. But I would beg to differ. I believe that the center of intellectualism starts and begins in Kemet, also known as Egypt. In fact, my podcast entitled Afrocentric. The term Afrocentric means to center the world and the lived experience of those in Kemet, which is in Africa. So I feel like it's only fitting to start this conversation off by talking about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. So the burning of the library in Alexandria provides more context around the idea of censoring intellectualship while providing and proving why the state should not be allowed to censor these creative works of the artist. The Great Library of Alexandria, which is located in Alexandria, Egypt, and named after Alexandria the Great, is remembered as one of the largest and most significant libraries within the ancient world. And it's believed that the Library of Alexandria housed roughly around 200,000 to 700,000 books and roughly 40,000 to 400,000 papyrus scrolls. And it was one of the larger research institutions referred in the mausoleum. Ironically enough, the mausoleum was dedicated to the Muses, which were the 9 goddesses of the arts. And you will remember the Muses from the Hercules movie. They're the only Black women featured there, but those Muses are the 9 goddesses of the arts. So as you can see, any type of art was celebrated and worshipped there. So since I'm talking about reading, I'm going to read to y'all some sources. And again, I do have a blog. You can click my link if you want any of these references to any of this information. That's why I provide a blog to you guys, so that you all can have a starting place and maybe go down a rabbit hole and actually read some information. So according to my first source, which is Mid-Continent Library, and their article entitled Historical Libraries, the Library of Alexandria, they state, and I quote, "As the library grew, so did Alexandria's reputation as a city of academics and scholars. Many important works came from the scholars as the library," end quote. So the Great Library of Alexandria had required and gained a reputation of being the beacon of information, intelligence, as well as skepticism. And again, I want to place an emphasis on this idea of skepticism. If you are an agreeable person and you can go with and along with anything that somebody says, you have a problem. There is always a need to be skeptical of things, always question things. That is how one learns. That is how one grows and exercises their minds. So because the Library of Alexandria was such a source and a beacon for information, intelligence, and skepticism, the library was burnt down multiple times throughout the years. And again, the Library of Alexandria has an 1,000-year history. The library was burnt down 3 times in its existence. These fires seem to come from religious conflicts or disagreements, but the burning of the library damaged their understanding of ancient civilizations. So I'm going to pause right there. Just because I think that we do need to hyper focus on the fact that the fires came from religious conflicts and disagreements, because it is very well known and very well documents that even the Bible that we read today, majority, not me stuttering, but majority of the Bible passages that we know come from a lot of Egyptian and Mesopotamic scriptures and myths, and they were really placed and put in a way that white people would be able, or the Gentiles would be able to see themselves within it. So a great example of that would be the idea of the mother, God the Spirit, God the Father, and Jesus. Yeah, the Holy Trinity, the three head. So that is a resemblance of the mother, Isis, the son, Osiris, and the child, I want to say Ra, but don't quote me on it. But a lot of these stories, a lot of the references originate here in the birthplace and the beacon of intellectualism. So when you conflict or you have conflicting ideas, it's always going to be a group of people who are going to overtake and try to conflict. And as we know throughout history, the Europeans do not conflict, they take and they conquer. So as you can see, this place was a hot spot. And as a result of these fires, there is so much lost information. It is well known, again, well documented that the Egyptians were scholars in math, geometry, anything that you feel like algebra. Majority of them had their basis in Egypt. The freaking pyramids, they still cannot believe were built by the Egyptians in Kemet, so much so that they would rather believe that aliens or extraterrestrial beings come down from the heavens to build this type of technology instead of severely just believing that Black people during that time had a source of knowledge that they did not have during that time. So because of the threat, because of so much information, so much understanding was so abundant, what they wanted was control. So they got rid of the information and controlled the masses. The library's purpose, according to historians, was to display the country's wealth, financial wealth, as well as the wealth of information the mausoleum had acquired, inspired many civilizations, cultures, and perspectives. Although this statement is true, if the Great Library still stood, then we would be better informed about the ancient Greeks, and then through them about their neighboring cultures. Most of what we know about ancient writings is from fragmentary sources. The number of resources and information lost from these fires is unfathomable and innumerable. There is no way of fully understanding how much information has been lost. And the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria reminds humanity of the importance of preserving history and the importance of having access to ancient information when trying to rebuild, to build, and preserve a civilization. Many people speculate that if we still had this information by the 16th century, humanity would have been able to explore space. So just think about where we would be as a whole if we all had access to this information. The 1933 book burnings in Germany is another grotesque example of why the state should not be allowed to censor the creative work of artists. And this can be seen through the censorship of intellectualism. According to my next article, the Holocaust Encyclopedia, it reads, quote, in 1933, Nazi Germany authorities aimed to synchronize professional and cultural organizations with Nazi ideology and policy. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi minister for popular enlightenment and propaganda, began an effort to bring German arts and culture in line with Nazi goals. Goebbels' attempt to usher in German arts and culture in line with Nazi goals was achieved by the removal of most of the creative work of Jewish arts. This statement is supported by this quote. The government purged cultural organizations of Jewish and other officials alleged to be politically suspect or who preferred or performed or created artworks which Nazi ideologies labeled degenerate. To provide more context, the Holocaust Encyclopedia defines book burnings as the ritual destruction by fire of books or other written materials. These book burnings are usually carried out in public context. The burning of the books represents an element of censorship and usually provide for a cultural, religious, and political opposition to the materials in question. Again, let's hyper-focus on the cultural and religious or political opposition to the materials in question. And ask yourself, how close is America to this same ideology and principle? How far away from going over and repeating this same problem, the same issue that was committed in 1933 Germany? What also is really fascinating to me is the fact that majority of the artwork has never been returned back to those families or the descendants of those who were murdered or harmed. Majority of the artifacts that were found within the Holocaust are still put into museums and are still being making money off of, and they're still making and brewing money just by sitting up there for over years and years and years. And that money goes back to white communities, probably to the Vatican. Let's just be honest about it. So let's get back on track. The 1933 book burnings in Germany is one of the most memorable and notorious book burnings in history because it provoked international criticism from intellectuals and the press. They saw it as a barbaric act that was out of keeping with a modern civilized society. It is important to note that this book burning was not only targeted towards Jewish artists, but anyone who did not align with Nazi ideology and their goals during this period. I understand that a lot of my listeners may not have the privilege to be able to go to higher learning and education like I did, or have, for those who did have the opportunity to go through higher education, they weren't given the privilege to sit down and actually take an in-depth history class that results with the Holocaust. I will tell you this. Within Nazi Germany, during this time period of the Holocaust, it was not just Jewish people who were killed during this time period. Those people and their art that were killed were people who were LGBTQIA, people mostly targeted towards mothers and children, people who were Black. They was not people who were Polish, not just Jewish people, okay? And it's not... They were trying to remove anything that did not resemble Nazi ideology. And I also want to place an emphasis on the fact that this is the roots and the epitome of Eurocentric ideology. The idea of having beautiful blue eyes and long, luscious, gold, curly hair is rooted within Nazi ideology. They were trying to what? Purify the race. So they were killing. They was rebuking, censoring, burning anything that did not resemble what they considered to be pure. And here at the Afrocentric Podcast, we reject any notions of Eurocentric ideology. And I know that's right. So, as a result of the bulk of information, context about popular culture, or general information concerning day-to-day lives of the minority community in Germany's lost. More importantly, these book burnings represent Nazis' intolerance and censorship. If the country of Germany as a whole had not taken decades to re-educate and mourn the terrible choices they made, the innocent lives they took, they would have potentially repeated these heinous acts of violence. Many of the creative works of these Jewish artists, again, still have not been located or recovered to this day. One can only imagine the works of art lost during these acts of violence and vice. Another really important point that I wanted to bring up to you guys is the fact that after the Holocaust, Germany did, in fact, take the time to re-educate Germans, as well as to vocally, publicly, and academically re-educate, as well as to remove all ideology or anything that looks similar to it. In fact, the country of Germany as a whole was in mourning. The whole country felt guilt from the 1930s all the way up to like 2003, when Germany was finally allowed to participate in the Olympics. That was the first time Germany was allowed to fly the German flag proudly and not actually feel shame and guilt for the atrocities that were committed during the Holocaust. And then you look at America, her shameless ass. That bitch has no couth. Because when America's like the Holocaust, and this is not anti-Semitic, it only lasted a few years. Slavery as a whole lasted for 400 years. And the number of casualties and the number of people lost during slavery, it quadruples the amount of people who were lost during the Holocaust. And this is not a pissing contest. I'm not trying to say who dick was bigger than the next country's dick. What I'm trying to say is that we had a larger impact as African Americans, as African people, as those who went through the Middle Passage, more traumatic issues passed down than those who suffered during the Holocaust. Again, not saying that what those of the Jewish descent went through was not traumatic, because it's not a pissing contest, but we do have decades upon decades of centuries of trauma. But unlike Germany, America has never taken the time to re-educate, never taken the time to publicly mourn the lives of the African people and descendants who lost their lives, not even just during enslavement, but during all these different wars and during the Middle Passage, just getting to enslavement, has never taken the time to adequately and properly re-educate or redirect the misinformation that has been placed and into the internet and at the fingertips of every single person in America. And that is the difference. And if we were to take the time to re-educate, you motherfuckers, they told me to be nice, you children of God would not be as ignorant sounding as you will. And it's just sad. It's really sad to see people really shitting on academia because they don't know any better. Reading during enslavement is a very interesting topic that I feel like really needs to be emphasized more, just because reading was definitely outlawed for many African Americans during enslavement. Reading was stupid important for slaves because enslaved people had many desires to want to read and write. A literate slave could forge passage or free papers and could aid a slave to escape. In fact, enslaved people forged free papers so frequently that blacks with a bona fide legal documents were also often suspected of forging them. Okay, so it was prevalent for black people to know how to read and write. But it's funny to think about how reading and writing was introduced into the slaves' day-to-day life. Most commonly, we know that the first book that many enslaved people received was the slave's Bible. Now, there is a large difference between the slave's Bible and the King James Version or the New Living Word version that you may have sitting up under your nightstand. Okay, so the slave Bible had several passages taken out. It was literally way thinner than any regular Bible that would have been printed during that time. But it's important to know that many of these passages that were printed into the slave Bible placed the emphasis on the idea of slaves clinging and obeying to their master and not angering their master. There were passages that supported the ideology of slavery and made many enslaved people think that it was of God's will to be enslaved and to serve their master for the rest of their lives. And while we're focusing on what was in the Bible, I think it's also important to focus on what was taken out of the Bible. And what was taken out of the slave's Bible were any type of passages that supported the idea of liberation, emancipation, or freedom. Because what does the Bible say? There are no more free in Christ Jesus. I'm gonna come back with this scripture. There is no more condemnation in Christ Jesus. I figured out. Y'all know Jesus still working on me. But it's important to know that it is manipulative. But if you wanted to even go farther into that, the King James Bible that you have up under your nightstand right now, the one that y'all be backsliding all next to when y'all go to them hotels and motels and letting the devil have their way with y'all, those Bibles are also censored too. You know how many different pieces of the Bible were removed when King James went through and edited the Bible? The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Mary Magdalene, the Book of James. the second book of James. Like, there's so many pieces of the Bible that were taken out systematically, and it wasn't just to keep us as Black people oppressed, but to keep us as a whole oppressed. Because if you don't know what you're privy to, you're not aware of what type of knowledge or what type of power that you're able to harness and know. One point that I always want to point out is that the book of Mary Magdalene was systematically removed from the Bible. Now, it's been speculated for years upon years that Jesus Christ had a lover on earth, and many people speculate that it was Mary Magdalene. Moreover, a lot of people speculate that Jesus has a specific bloodline on earth as a result of his child with Mary Magdalene. But the book of Mary Magdalene specifically focuses on, number one, it places an emphasis on women's right, the idea of a matriarch within our society, supporting women, as well as being self-sufficient in the understanding that God is within us. Okay, so as African American people, being able to read is literally a form of emancipation and liberation. Once you can read, half of your battle is over. Once you can comprehend or place an analysis within it, you know what I'm saying, you can be freed from anything. So it was just, hell, they fought for their right to be able to read. You know how many times African American people went to voting booth and they had those stupid literacy tests down there, and they made my ancestors prove to them that they could read, and them jokers sat up there and read the Emancipation Proclamation, freedom documents. They sit up there and made them read the Pledge of Allegiance, and even if the slave master or the person who was proctoring the voting booths, if they felt like they said something wrong, even if they didn't, they would not let them vote. Just think about that. Those people were they were groundbreakers. They are luminaries. They paved the way for us. And I feel like they need to be reverenced more, because just the idea of just reading on your own could have easily been the end of your life. You could have, if Massa found out you could read, that would be your eyeballs, your head, and your tongue, baby. And for majority of Southern slaves, if they found out that an enslaved person could read, they would kill them, specifically in Tennessee and in Arkansas. So y'all peep that. There's a reason why they try to keep you from reading. What my mama said, if you want to hide anything from a nigga, put it in a book. That ain't nothing but the truth. Here are a few Bible verses that would have been taken out of the slave Bible that correlate to the ideas of freedom. So 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, now the Lord is a spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord, there is freedom. John 8:36 says, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. 1 Chronicles 6:12, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. Let me see. Galatians 5:13-14. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. And there's just a few examples. Look at it, Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Well, I be. So that just gives you a reference point, like an idea to be able to say, these dirty, hueless bastards took out all these different scriptures out of the Bible just to manipulate our ancestors. And like I said, it is a war on education. There is a war on intellectualism. It's a lie by omission. Lie by omission. They lied about what was free to us, what we could have and could not have. Not you believe in Jesus, but don't believe in your emancipation.
Use your noodle, use your brain. Gotta think out of the box. Out of the box. So when
even though you have not probably heard of critical race theory until last year, although it's been around for 30 years, you practice critical race theory every day if you're a person of color. You practice critical race theory every time you know and act on your recognition that this is not a colorblind world. You practice critical race theory every time you see the police sirens in your rearview mirror and you put your hands in the 10 and 2 o'clock position. You are practicing critical race theory. Every time we give our children the talk, and we must, we are practicing critical race theory. Every time we try to refinance our home, and we realize that we need to take our black pictures down and our black art off the wall and bring some white people in to sell that for us, we are practicing critical race theory. The time you're sitting in that meeting and you say something and it goes over like a lead balloon, and the white guy next to you says the same thing 5 minutes later, and it's like that's the best thing they've ever heard, and you go, you are practicing critical race theory. So the point is that these are the lived realities that we have used to survive in a world that was not made along the myth of equality and colorblindness. It was made, and it is still a society it's a post-slave society. It's not the same as a society that never has had slavery. It's not the same as a society that didn't have a Supreme Court that said black people will never be part of this republic because they were enslavable people. That was once part of the law. So critical race theory is basically a way of saying, yes, the collapse of white supremacy was one step in a long journey. And that journey is one that each generation has to take using the wisdom that has been passed down to us. So whenever you recognize that what the other side is trying to say is that your race consciousness comes against color blindness, they're basically calling you a critical race theorist. And at this point, you should say, yes, I am. Because that's how we survived. And that is how this democracy is going to survive. We cannot survive thinking that the attack on democracy and the attack on anti-racism are separate things. They are one and the same right now. And to save one, we have to save the other.
Okay. I understand what y'all saying. Y'all saying Morgan, the shit you talking about is old. It's dead. Martin Luther. OD. We don't want to hear about the old shit. Bring me some new shit. There's no problem, my niggas. When I say there's no problem, I got you. To bring it full circle, I'm going to be talking about the modernity of censorship of critical race theory. So that we are on the same page. I will interchangeably saying CRT and critical race theory. Okay, it's gonna be either or, and I don't want y'all to get lost because I'm finna drop some bombs on y'all. So personally, for me, myself as a person of color, as an African-American woman, it's really scary to witness the modernity of censorship of the critical race theory in public schools around the country. So I know you might be asking, Morgan, what the fuck is critical race theory? So according to my next source, critical race theory, written by the Legal Defense Fund, is defined as an academic and legal framework that denotes the systemic racism is a part of American society, from education and housing to employment and healthcare. So in totality, critical race theory is the teaching of anything that has to do with the involvement of African American people within society and how it has affected American society as a whole. Okay. So ever since, to be quite frank with you, since 2020, there's been an uprising of political rhetoric and laws that support the removal, the banning, and the censorship of critical race theory. And the petition to censor and remove CRT is rooted in fear. Many parents are afraid that their children will discover how much of a role their ancestors played in colonization, enslavement, and the oppression of minority groups in America's past and present. Now we seeing this shit play out right now with Jerry Jones, that old dusty bastard who owns the Dallas Cowboys. There's a picture of him right now circulating when I want to say, what is it, and I know the name of it, the Arkansas 9. They were trying to integrate a school in Arkansas, and Jerry Jones sitting in the crowd Hair thin as they, and he out there spitting and barking at folks allegedly. And again, you got to remember about the illusion of time. Those pictures were in black and white, but those pictures are not old. You can find regular colored pictures from that time period, but that's the game they want to play, so we're gonna play stupid with them. Okay, so how can you sit up here and tell me that the effects of what happened and the people who made it happen are not still alive, and we still dealing with Jerry Jones in the NFL? So moving on, I want to read another source, and it's called Why Are States Banning Critical Race Theory? And it's written by Rashawn Ray and Alexandria Gibbons, and it explains this idea more inadequately. And it states, simply put, critical race theory states that the U.S. social institutions, so when we say social institutions, that's criminal justice system, the educational system, labor market, housing market, and healthcare, are laced with races embedded in laws, regulations, rules, and procedures that lead to differential outcomes by race. So you have to understand that critical race theory does not just affect the academia, it affects everything. So that's the housing market, the healthcare system, that is the educational system, the criminal justice system, the labor market, that's everything. And because a handful of Americans believe that critical race theory courses have the potential to create an environment that demonizes the offspring of American colonizers, they are willing to erase roughly 400 years of creative work from minority artists and survivors. This belief raises many questions for the people on the right side of history. The main question would be, why would the offspring of European Americans identify with the mindset of the oppressors and not the mindset of the abolitionists? I'm going to let that shit sink in for a second. Because if any one of us paid attention to the American history books, all white people were not outwardly racist. You got Quakers, the motherfuckers I told y'all they was eating the oats and they was eating the meal and they was eating all the crackers and stuff. They weren't racist. They wrote all types of laws, legislation, books, pamphlets that publicly demonize and criticize enslavement, the oppression, sexism, all types of things, stating that it was morally wrong for white people to participate in the act of enslavement and the oppression of African American people. Okay? So I guess white people completely have forgotten about this part of their heritage. The abolitionists, the ones that went out of their way and put their lives on the line in order to say that morally they felt like enslavement was wrong. But they remember about their oppressive ass ancestors, the ones that they want everybody to forget. Well, okay. All right. But this is a real problem. It really is. And it is rooted in fear, because it's a lot of they meemaws and peepaws out here that was throwing hands, spitting on motherfuckers, sacking dogs on motherfuckers, setting out water hoses on motherfuckers in real life, in real times. They're sitting in nursing homes right now, admitting to the fact that okay, so I be listening to a lot of nurses talk about how they work with hospice, end of life care. And they will talk about how they will be catering and taking care of many old white women and ladies and such within the hospice center. And they'll just casually admit to murdering little black kids or setting little black people houses on fires. One specifically really registers with me about this white woman who was talking about how her family ended up lynching a family of black people because she was jealous because one of the little black girls had on a dress that looked nicer than hers. Yeah. So those are the people that they trying to get us to forget. But I'll never forget. More importantly, I'll never forget the ancestors again who went through all these hardships just because their skin was darker than everybody else's and because somebody wanted to take power over them. So what's really the problem with CRT? Why do you really want to remove it from schools? Why don't you want our Black children to know about their history and not just be sad about it, but to empower those Black people? Are you telling me that the possible white tears of white people is more important than Black children adequately being informed and learning about their heritage? That shit is more important. The feelings of white children is 10 times more important than the feelings of Black children. Okay. I hear you. I back off.
So we have warned you time and time again that CRT was nothing but a front to return our schools to a more Eurocentric, white-friendly version of history. And today, Governor Youngkin took the first steps in that, in which he released his K-5 curriculum. In that curriculum, they have completely removed Martin Luther King Jr. from the elementary curriculum. They have completely removed one of the most prominent people of color in American history. They have also referred to Native Americans and indigenous people as America's first immigrants. I shit you not. Immigrants from where? Doesn't even make sense. They also removed the African country or civilization of Mali from the third grade curriculum and replaced it with a much more Eurocentric Greece and Rome curriculum. So here's a list of all the people that made it into the curriculum, and Dr. Martin Luther King clearly did not. Were we overreacting?
This is the part of the episode where I try to convince y'all to read or to participate in the arts more. I will always tell people, beauty fades, but intellect is really what lasts the longest. But I understand that encouraging people to read is far more than that, just because the educational system has failed us. Moreover, the Mississippi education has failed my peers. Lord have mercy. And it'll be just the sheer audacity of having a bitch with 6th grade reading level trying to tell me about what I'm saying is stupid. And I just have to let motherfuckers have it, because I don't argue with dumb people. I don't argue with people that are below me. Anywho, I know that within the American educational system, a lot of people were passed on. A lot of people who were athletes were passed on just because they had the ability to play sports. A lot of Black girls that were specifically really meek, very quiet and humble, they were passed on just because they were cute. A lot of people passed on a lot of little Black boys just because they were a handful and they wanted to get them out of the class. And again, some people just fell through the cracks. What is unfortunate is the fact that there are not a lot of programs that are focused upon helping rehabilitate those who are adults that have issues with reading. There are a lot of studies and focal points on helping children to learn how to study, helping children catch up to read at a proficient level, but there are not a lot of programs or a lot of studies of African American adults or just adults in America in general to be able to learn how to read. And that is a very telling sign. With that in mind, I do want to talk about imposter syndrome for a second, because I feel like that is what really has African American people in a chokehold. For those who do not know, imposter syndrome can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite evidence of success. So, people with imposter syndrome experience continuous frustration and anxiety, being concerned that they're not good enough, that they will be exposed as incompetent, and that everyone else knows that they are what they're doing. As a result, they engage with self-sabotage, overworking, and depression. I know that for a lot of Black people, including myself, we go through imposter syndrome because all of our lives we have been told that the work that we are doing is not good enough. Or for the majority of us, our parents have always told us that in order for us to surpass the white man, we have to work 10 times harder. And that is so freaking stressful. That is so much stress to have the progress of the entire culture on your back, yet and still we do it. So when we infiltrate white spaces, a lot of times we feel like the things that we've done, the amount of time and work we put into something, or the effort that we put into something is not good, because what you have been told your whole life is that it will never equate to the value of what another white person does. So I wanted to remind y'all that because of years and years and years of African Americans breaking their back, and not just African Americans, POCs, people of color, because we've been working so hard to prove to the general public that we are so much better, so much smarter, so much more adequate. White people actually are not adequate enough to be able to do the work, because so many people have let them slide and let them pass through. A lot of them are not qualified to be able to do the work. And I know for those who are in different fields, such as like a science field, a technology field, or even in education, you will learn that your peers are not on the level in which you are. When I first got into grad school, I learned that my peers in my class were not as smart as I was, which was really disappointing. My greatest excitement about going to grad school was the fact that I was going to be surrounded by other intellectuals like myself, and it was not the case. I was very drastically let down because I quickly learned that the motherfuckers that went to school with me just were not on my level, and that is not their fault. That is the fault of the educational system. And it also shows me where I'm going and where I'm at. There's a reflection of my work. So I want people to be mindful of that, especially college students. In fact, most students have experienced imposter syndrome at least one time or another. However, studies have shown that students of color may experience microaggressions, racial discrimination, and feel underrepresented. In turn, these students may experience imposter syndrome at a higher rate than white college students. So, with that being said, there are 5 kinds of imposter syndrome personalities, and I want you guys to hear this and think about it. The first one is the perfectionist, and that is rooted in white supremacy. I have a tendency to want to be a perfectionist. I know a lot of people in academia, they are perfectionists. I remember when I had to write my dissertation, my thesis. It was a 20-page paper I had to write in undergrad. And I was writing about Black women supporting and uplifting other Black women. 20-page paper. I had probably read 5 different books in order to put all this information within the paper. The thing about it was that I didn't feel like my paper did justice. Not to me, not to my peers, not to my teacher, not to the university. I felt like my paper did not give enough justice to the ancestors in which I was writing for and on the behalf of, like Mary Church Terrell, Ida B. Wells, Sojourner Truth. I felt like I didn't give them enough justice to be able to put their words into paper. I wish I had the ability at the time to be able to communicate my thoughts in the ability that I can now in the capacity. But that is a sign of perfectionism, being a perfectionist. And I just want you guys to be able to point that out. It's okay. Nothing will ever be perfect. There's no such thing as 100%. You'll never find a 100% out in the wild. So it's okay to make mistakes. The next one is the natural genius. And I hate that for the nerds, the people who feel like it's not okay to not know everything, or the motherfuckers that feel the need to correct people every time they say something right. That is a form of imposter syndrome. It's okay not to know everything. It's okay to admit that you don't know anything. It's okay to do research. It's okay to make a mistake and say something wrong as long as you correct yourself. The rugged individualist. Now, that definitely is a reflection of white supremacy. White supremacy is a reflection of the American culture. Being an individualist, only thinking about myself and what benefits me. That is an idea and a symptom of the imposter syndrome. As Black people, we are supposed to be thinking about what helps and uplifts the community. When you take the I out of that motherfucker, you'll be all right. I know it ain't no iron team. I know that's an M&E team, but it's also an iron individualist, and you was wrong. The last one is the expert, and it's the final type of imposter within the personalities of imposter syndrome. And again, I feel like that goes with the natural genius. You don't have to know everything. So be gentle with yourself. You are supposed to be where you are, and you will also get where you are supposed to be in time. And I hope that makes sense. And I hope no one feels as if I'm questioning their intelligence. I just know that as Black people, imposter syndrome definitely would get in our way. I think ageism definitely gets in our way too. I think the idea of running out of time really hurts people. I feel like setting goals too far in advance hurts people. Like, I feel like people upon stumbling upon their 30s are stressing themselves out because they don't have houses or cars they thought they would have, or people didn't think they would be where they are 5 years ago. So just be mindful and be cautious and love on yourself. Be patient with yourself, because hell, your grandma didn't see COVID coming. Yo, Miss Cleo did not see the pandemic hitting. So you be patient and kind to yourself.
Who's the real imposter when we talk about imposter syndrome? Is it the person that is coming into a new space that they have had to prove through some various mechanisms, means, applications, or ways that they should be in the space? Is that the imposter? Or is the imposter those already in that space who did not have to go through those same mechanisms? So when you show up and you can not only do what you were called to do, but also do it to a better degree, is the imposter then those who are already there projecting onto you, or are you the imposter? Let's get into it. Hi, my name is Dr. Nicole Truesdale. I'm an anthropologist and an abolitionist scholar and teacher. When I worked in higher ed, we were always talking with, or at least I know I was always talking with a lot of students about this idea of imposter syndrome. Many of them, because I was working with students who were mostly first-gen, low-income, and/or minority because of the populations and the programs I was under. The idea of imposter syndrome was always there, always at the front door. And many times when the students I worked with would come to me, usually distraught because they were uncomfortable with the location they were in. They were questioning whether they belonged there because the classroom or the information was different and new. There was a way that they felt like they were an imposter in this space. They didn't belong. But I'm going to push back on that heavily because I do not like the term imposter syndrome because it is always used and put upon marginalized bodies, particularly Black and brown and queer and indigenous bodies, when we walk into majority white spaces. And the thing is, we are not the imposters in these spaces. The space is the imposter to begin with. Because in order for us to be in many of these spaces, we have had to somehow prove ourselves in these ridiculously high performing ways. This is why many of us experience burnout so early on, because we have been burning the midnight oil in order to be able to be legible in these spaces. But the space was never for us because the space only sees us as a commodity. But now your commodity is now turned into your biggest nightmare, because when we walk into these spaces and bring ourselves into these spaces because we have had to prove we belong in these spaces, then the imposter syndrome of the institution and the people who align with that institution is actually coming up. But what does whiteness do? What does white institutions do? What do white institutions do? They project. They can never self-reflect because all they know how to do is consume. All they know how to do is take. So the imposter syndrome is not about you as the marginalized body. The imposter syndrome is actually showing you where the slippage and the mediocrity of the space you are in actually lies. So don't believe this hype, y'all, when you go into these new spaces. You belong there. The space.
So as a historian in training, I am required to read a lot of books. It is not because, I'm just hoopla for reading. I will say that I do understand the importance of reading, and I want to encourage you all to read more. So I've compiled a list of tips for reading, but before I get to that, I did want to talk about my epiphany that I had with reading. And it probably started about 4 years ago when I switched my major from fashion design and merchandising to history. And when I changed my major, I started to notice that there was a language of academia that I had to completely understand and adapt within my language. And that is also known as code switching, the ability to, I guess, flip and flop between what type of dialect I want to use in order to express myself, especially in academic settings. So what I learned was that I did not have the arsenal of words that I wanted to have in order to properly describe the way that I felt. And that is, I know a problem that a lot of Black people have is the fact that they don't have enough words to be able to properly express the way that they feel. They'll probably use very basic words like, how are you feeling today? I'm sad, or I'm upset, or I'm angry. Never I feel flustered. Something, a little bit more specific. So one thing that I started to do was I always started Googling words, like even just on TikTok, following accounts that teach you a new word a day, as well as show you ways to implement them within your day-to-day life and different sentences and different ways to implement them. So I will always encourage people that when you are watching TV and you hear a word that you are not familiar with, instead of just letting it go by, try to figure out what the word means and how to implement it into your day-to-day life. Also, on the idea of feelings, when I was working at the Boys and Girls Club, again, I realized that a lot of the young children did not have enough words to be able to express themselves verbally about how they were feeling emotionally. So what I would do is I would always present them with a feelings wheel. And this is something that you can easily Google and be able to find. And it's a circle. And within the circle on the outer, the circle is set with circles on the inside of it. So on the outside of the circle will be very broad terms. And the more in-depthly you go inside of the circle, it will give you synonyms that are more specific to feelings and aren't as broad. So I will also encourage you all, for those who personally feel as if you do not know enough words to be able to adequately describe your feelings, I think you should find a good feelings wheel to help you in that area. Another thing I will always tell Black people, because we will listen to podcasts, and that's fine. You can always listen to my podcast if you want more information. You will look at a magazine post, you will read tweets on Twitter all day, but you won't actually read a book. That is reading, but you're not really putting yourself in a situation where you're reading an analysis and really expanding your mind. So again, find a fucking book. I will say, when you are watching movies and watching TVs, I will always encourage all the thugs and the drug dealers on the go to put the subtitles up there. Y'all be watching the cartel movies, and y'all be watching all the ganging movies and all this stuff. Put the subtitles down there and read it as you're hearing it. It'll help with your comprehension, as well as give you an idea on how to actually spell these words. Because as we say, autocorrect is going to be the death of spelling. A lot of young children struggle with spelling because autocorrect is going to correct them before they even realize that they spelled wrong. Take more time to sit down and actually write with your hands. I know that it hurts. I know it feels uncomfortable, and it feels better just to type it out, but practice writing as well. So as far as these tips go, the first tip that I wanted to give you all is make time for reading. Well, I know we make time for what we want to do, but a great way to unwind is to read. Every time there's a blackout, I take a book out and read. So when you are taking time and making time to read, make sure that you are reducing the distractions during your reading time. Make sure that your space is quiet. Turn off all the screens and focus specifically on reading. Okay. That's another side note I don't think y'all really understand is like being like overwhelmed by having way too much stuff going on at one time. I will be overwhelmed when I go in someone's house because their phone will be playing music, they'll have a TV on in the background, somebody on the phone talking, laughing, screaming. You're not going to be able to focus in that environment. Find a quiet environment so that you can focus in. Always bring a book with you. If you go someplace, let's say you ride the bus, you ride the train, you have long periods of waiting, instead of getting on your phone, read a book. If you have some extra time, and you, especially if you antisocial, you know what I'm saying? Like, I bring books when I go to the nail shop. I did right there. That make you look bougie. If you trying to look bougie, go to a public and read your book. White people would just be so flabbergasted. They be like, who taught this colored woman here how to read? No, they didn't. And you be like, yes, they sure did teach me how to read. Apple, APPLE. They'd be so impressed. It's a nice little party trick for some of y'all. Let's see. Find what you enjoy to watch and then turn it into a book. Find something like that. There are really books. If y'all some sluts, go find y'all some fantasy books, the little sultry Zane books. Y'all remember the Zane books that had y'all in a chokehold, that their crack pipe. Find you some smaller books to read. You don't have to go and get the Cameron. You don't have to go and get the Quasimodo books and all the Harry Potter books and stuff. Find you a smaller book and start there and make your way up there. Now, back in Mississippi, we had the reading colors and stuff. So if you was a little slow, you would start off with the blue books, the light blue books. So you read this like your little small books with the pictures and stuff. Now, if you ain't slow, you just a little simple, they'll give you something like a little orange book, little pink book. If you ain't slow and you ain't simple, you just a little stupid, they'll give you a dark blue book. That's a good 500-page book. Now, if you brilliant like your girl here, they'll give you a black book, and the niggas that remember gonna remember. You was trying to get the black books, you was trying to get the brown books, so you could read Black Beauty and The Color Purple. I was reading The Color Purple when I was in 6th grade. That shit was lit. I ain't know what the fuck I was reading, but I was bragging about this shit. Y'all should also take the time to go to a bookshop or a library, like for real. Y'all always be hollering, it ain't nothing to do. Go take your ass to a library. Take your ass to a museum. Like, honestly, go find you something to do. Go get lost in some books or some shit. Spend times with your significant other reading together. I ain't gonna lie, one of my ideal sisters did start a book club. I wish there were more book clubs available within Black areas where we could read Black pieces of literature. I don't have the time on my hands to specifically start a book club, nor do I think that's my calling. I don't think that's what God has in plan for my life, but that's a free idea for one of y'all if y'all want to steal it. Encourage people to look at social media posts about books. And I will say that TikTok is a great place to find like books that are new and innovative. Facebook also has a lot of nice book clubs or groups that will encourage you to read some smutty, something intellectual, something about Black lives, whatever. You don't have to read what I'm reading. The whole purpose of it is to just encourage you all to read, and not just reading, any form of art. That's poetry. I feel like y'all don't do enough poetry no more. Like, all y'all do is TikTok dances. Ain't nobody out here putting truth to paper no more. Y'all not drawing like y'all used to. Y'all not singing like they used to. That is a great way to express yourself and to let out so much anger and hostility. All y'all do is smoke blunts. That's all y'all do nowadays. Where is your passion? Where's your frustration? Where are you pouring into it? And is it healthy? So, without a further ado, I'd like to close on this topic and say, advocate for the arts, protect the arts, liberal arts matter.
that this kind of push against anti-reading that we have seen a lot more of in the past few years, especially in social media and spaces like Twitter and in public discourse, is part of an historical loop that we have seen in time of what happens when the dominant power structure coming out of these kind of imperialist and colonial projects that we are now living in that I talk about a lot. What we see is this continual demonization of reading, demonization of the written word. And in this present moment, we can take all of these kind of rhetorics around not reading and how people are glorifying not reading and people's understandings of why folks don't read to be a signal of how essentially fascist understandings embed themselves in society so that when authoritarian power really does rear its ugly head, it doesn't have as much pushback as it would if the population was actually read. Because reading is one way that we open up our minds. It's not the only way, but it is one major way. Because reading, the written word, writing things out that people then can then digest in their mind's eye, that allows their mind to then start to imagine and dream of different ways of being, that imagination, that dream making is something that has to actually be learned and cultivated in society. But we don't cultivate learning in society, especially U.S. society, especially in K through 12. We cultivate what? Testing. Because if you learn to be in a seat for X amount of times in a day, if you learn to work through and work around a clock, if you learn to follow directions, if you learn to regurgitate what you are told, then you are trained to be a good worker. You are not training to be a good thinker. So when we think about the function of reading and the purpose of reading and what reading does to the human mind, but when we put that alongside then what the current power structure needs of us, we then can see why anti-reading is so prevalent. Because don't get it twisted, y'all. There has always been books throughout history, but as we have seen in historical records, the colonizers, once they came in, they took those historical records and burnt them. Because to remember where you came from, to remember something different that can actually be told in a written record would mean you might actually be able to dream of a different type of being and freedom that has not been afforded to you. So always remember, anti-reading is a part of power's playbook in order to maintain its power base and keep us as workers.
Shout out to the slaves.
Yeah, shout out to the slaves. You feel me? Shout out to Harriet Tubman.
Shout out to she's a real nigga.
Shout out to the real niggas.
And shout out again to all those people who hate my guts.
Y'all are doing a justice and an effort to the world. Keep breaking these men down one at a time.
You are obsessed and sick.
Welcome back to the biggest, blackest, thickest, juiciest shout out on this side of the Mississippi River. For those who do not know, the Big Black Shout Out is an opportunity to help circulate the Black dollar within Black communities, as well as to give you guys an opportunity to find new hidden gems. So today I'm going to be shouting out some of my new and some of my favorite Black-owned businesses. So today I wanted to start off with the Glam Shop. Okay, the Glam Shop is a Black-owned hair business in Starkville, Mississippi. Shamaya Jefferson is a certified cosmologist. She is amazing with braids, wig installs, men braids, sew-in. So if you are in the GTA, the Starkville area, if you got gas money, hop in the hoopty and come on down to the Glam Shop and come get your did and come get your bangs swooped and all that good jolly joy, okay? And if you are looking for the Glam Shop, you can find this page on Instagram at hair_by_Shamaya. That is spelled HAIR_BY_SHAMAYAH. Tell her that Morgan sent you. Amen. So the next company that I will be shouting out is called Sacred. Shout out to Sacred. Sacred is a Black-owned boutique, and the mission of Sacred is aimed to cater to those who desire to express their creative aura through fashion in a sustainable and minimalistic way. So Sacred is owned by a beautiful soul, and I will be doing a collaborator podcast episode where I will be featured on her episode and she will be featured on mine. So we're looking forward to that. But in the meantime and in between time, y'all need to shop sacred. In fact, that's her Instagram handle. Find Shop Sacred at SHOPSCRD. Shop Sacred at Instagram. Amen. Let me see who my next business is. Yes, that's going to be T3 Productions. T3 Productions is owned by Trinity Tubbs. Trinity is a student filmmaker socializing in cinematography located in Starkville and Jackson, Mississippi. And T3 Production also has a new short film out called Soar. So y'all check that out and shout out to you, Trinity Tubbs. This is what I mean by support the arts. Lastly, somebody's looking for a brand ambassador. Yes, are you looking to become a brand ambassador? Well, look no further. Chocolate Diva, the Chocolate Diva, is looking for a brand professional. She is an esthetician. She is looking for fresh faces that are nice, professional, and funny. You need to have great communicatory skills. But yes, if you are wanting to be a brand ambassador, please email Christian Neely. That's Christian Neely, KRYSTIANNEELY at iCloud.com. Or you can find the Chocolate Diva on Instagram at chocolate_diva_2000. Well, yes, shout out to all my Black owners, the Black professionals, and the Black finesses. Y'all continue to make that good coin, that good money. Now, if you know another Black-owned businesses that you want me to personally shout out, make sure you are emailing me at the Afrocentric Podcast. That's afrocentricpodcast@gmail.com.
Please forgive me for any sins in which I committed, those I know of and those I don't know of, Lord. Lord, please forgive me for beating this bitch ass today, Lord. Lord, please forgive me for thinking about beating her ass again, Lord. Please rebuke all these demons that's in this house, Lord. I pray unto you, Lord. Is that really necessary?
Yes, welcome back to the Afrocentric word of church and God and faith on the cross where Jesus died on Mount Gilgamesh. Amen. Yes, we all know that the altar call is the final segment of any Afrocentric episode, and I'm just here to remind y'all that I'm yet fasting and praying and hoping and intervening, and I'm sitting in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and I'm arguing with the devil, and I'm asking him to let my people go. Yes, I am. I climbed the mountain for this relationship for my Black people. I'm here to save our marriage, Lord. Yes, I am, Jesus. So on today, we will be praying for Sister Megan, the Stallion, Sister Soldier of Christ. Yes, we are. And we is praying for her because her court hearings against Tory Little Man Lanes has just started. And we just praying for her. We ask Jesus, yes, Lord, keep her mind, Lord, keep her mind. And we just wanted to encourage her to pray on just a little while longer.
Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. And everything else is gonna be all right. Hey, pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. And everything will be all right.
is this what we paid for?
Yes, yes, yes. Jesus be a fence. It's been reported that the Mississippi State head football coach Mike Leach has passed away Monday, December 12th at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi, following complications from a heart condition. He was 61. But I want to remind y'all that this is not a funeral. This is a celebrate.
This ain't a funeral. This is a celebrate.
And how quickly you colored folks forget that Mike Leach was a little racist. Lord, jog their memory, Lord, and help them remember all those foul tweets that he put. Yes, he tweeted a picture depicting an elderly lady knitting with the caption reading, "After 2 weeks of quarantine, her husband Gertrude decided to knit him a scarf, but the picture showed her knitting a noose with the hangman's knot already tied." So while some might be mourning the loss of Mike Leach, I just wanted to remind y'all that he is going down yonder to be with his maker. So if y'all will all bow y'all heads, we'll have a moment of silence.
I'm so hurt.
Amen, amen. For a moment of silence, please.
Sarah,
Yes, baby.
do I have to sit here through all this mess?
Baby, just be patient. It's almost over.
We don't take nobody this long to get put in the ground. They don't hear up, they gonna wake up.
Amen, amen.
Finally, I just wanted to give a testimony about how God is so good. You see, my ancestors tell me that Jesus is a doctor in the sick room. Yes, they said Jesus is a lawyer in the courtroom, but today Jesus was a universal key in the jailhouse. Yes, Lord. Because they freed Brittany Griner. Yes, y'all ain't hearing me today. I said the Bible tells us that at midnight Paul and Silas was praying and singing hymns unto God. And then suddenly there was an earthquake that shook the prisons. Their shackles fell and the walls came down and they were free to go. So sometimes when the Lord says you are free indeed. Somebody say amen.
And we've won another battle. The war might not be over, but we won another battle. Thank you, Jesus. I know what I'm talking about in the spirit. It's shout. Woo!
Read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. R-E-A-D-A-B-O-O-K. 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 Not a sports page, not a magazine, but a book, nigga. A fucking book, nigga. Not a sports page, not a magazine, but a...
The truth of the matter is either you can be slow, simple, or stupid. Y'all gotta realize you gotta pick a struggle. Y'all can't be both. So with that in mind, I just wanted to encourage y'all again to participate in the arts, participate in reading a book. That's gonna be real good for y'all. That'll keep y'all out the streets and gang banging and slanging iron and such. Anywho, again, I want to thank y'all so much for spending a little time with me down here at the Afrocentric podcast. I love you all so dearly. Thank you so much for choosing to be Afrocentric today. Please remember that Black Lives Matter. Listen and protect both children and Black women. And the only thing that you must do in this lifetime is be Black and die. And here at the Afrocentric podcast, remember that we're just civilized people having civilized conversations. Bye-bye.
These books, these are your friend. And I hear a lot of ignorance and a lot of stupid shit from niggas who are not reading. The answers to these questions, Brooke, take away the R.
Okay.
And it's book. Someone says to you, they say, hey, how did white people benefit from American governmental programs? When affirmative action was white by Ira Katz Nelson.
Yes, man.
A book. Let's say someone says, what's the difference between America and other countries that have dealt with racist, subhuman movements, exercising Hitler? The book will explain it to you. What if you want to learn about how we can win? How we can win by Kimberly Jones. That's a book. Understanding Power. Noam Chomsky. You guys, these are books. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. It's a book. What if you want to know about how one of the most brilliant men in all of the world, a Black gay man struggling to contextualize his world, what if you want to know how he viewed it? James Baldwin. Y'all don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and it's hurting us. I'm sick of going back and forth day after day after day after day with motherfuckers who didn't do the work. The shit that you're saying is bullshit. It's all lies. It's all dumb. It's the same shit you heard the other motherfucker say. He got it from the other motherfucker who got it from the other motherfucker who got it from the motherfucker who's trying to trick you. And then you come back and you brag about how fucking ignorant you are.
It's the bragging for me.
Pick up a book and read before you get your stupid ass on the internet and fuck over everybody.